Welcome to episode 238 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav, back in Manchester, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, you're back in Manchester, which means we are up for another somewhat early weekend recording and afternoon recording for you.
That's right. I've had a day.
No, I have not. I woke up, I didn't make coffee. I had a bowl of protein cereal. It was good.
Is that just is that meat with milk on it? What does that mean? Protein cereal,
just like some kind of like high protein cereal, like
Is it Magic Box?
I wish it was Magic Spoon. Get at us. I know that you sponsor podcasts. I'll eat your cereal.
Yeah, Pete Holmes sells Magic Spoon
too.
I had Count Chocula. I bought a box of Count Chocula to bring back to England with me because it's obviously impossible to find here because there's two cereals.
Hold on, does General Mills not distribute in the UK?
It might, but they don't. The English don't have like
sugar
seasonal mascot cereals. Like the only seasonal cereals we'll have is like once every 60 years when there's a new coronation, we'll have like the coronation blend.
No.
What are the two cereals, Stan? Can I guess what they are? Is one called something along the lines of muesli? Something in that space? Because I've seen that word in Europe a number of times, and I'm always like, what is muesli?
No, it's cheeky buggers, but it's just kicks.
Yeah, and then the other one is it's cheeky corn buggers.
Yeah, so
are those the two cereals?
You've seen them. You've seen them both.
Cheeky corn.
Yeah, and in the muesli, it feels like it's ground up cardboard with peanuts for some reason.
You're not way off. We got some like mac and cheese, some packaged macaroni and cheese to make our 2-year-old for lunch today. And I'm at the Tesco Superstore. It's like one of the biggest supermarkets in Manchester. And I'm like, I couldn't find any mac and cheese. So I asked them, I'm like, do you guys have mac and cheese? And it was like maybe a 19-year-old boy who sighed and he's like, it's just not as big here in England. And they had one type of macaroni and cheese, okay, in this whole supermarket that sells like clothing and toys and light bulbs and food, all right? One type of macaroni and cheese, right. And it tasted like cardboard. It was not good. The kid ate it with glee, but my wife and I were like, this is wrong.
We're not doing this again. We're not doing muesli and cheese again.
We're gonna have to buy our macaroni and cheese off of Amazon. Like, how cursed is that? Have I introduced Dave, our godfather?
No.
I don't think so.
Our gourmand? Hey, Dave.
Hey, everybody.
How's your muesli, Dave?
I'm back. I had a Bagsley for myself for this morning. I'm just trying to recover from the wild weekend I've had. Where Friday I went and did vintage cube draft with Stan's friends, filling in as a meager replacement for Stan among his friend/magic playing group.
Yeah.
I did draft a broken deck in your honor, though.
Well, thank you.
With all the fast artifact mana. And then yesterday was giant block party day on my block, which is like kind of gets pretty wild. And yeah, I barely made it to the show is what I'm going to say.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks. My voice is sonorous and extra deep this morning, maybe.
Dave, Shane, now that you're both here, can I tell you about Heavy Play?
Please.
It's this awesome card gaming accessories line that is designed to improve your gameplay and your game day. You're
not putting Pokemon in those, are you?
Of course I'm going to put Pokemon in them.
Okay. I guess I'll allow it.
Thanks. I'm also going to use Pokemon with their playmats, their deck boxes, of course, and yeah, even their card sleeves. They feature enhanced ergonomics designed for mobility as well as protection. And my favorite part about all the Heavy Play stuff is their Equip Mag system, which allows you to
snap,
magnetically snap dice, deck boxes, and playmats all together into one very convenient system.
You know what? One thing we don't actually talk about much with this is that it allows you to have different deck boxes, but like one dice box and like trinket box. And so that's like an annoying thing for me is like I'll have one like Satin Tower type thing, right? And then you're just like, I have to move my cards around between my Ultimate Guard products. No shade on Ultimate Guard, good stuff, right? But like you now just have one dice box that just snaps to whatever deck you're choosing to take.
I love that. And the dice box, which I'm holding up right now, maybe this will appear in the YouTube video or not, is also magnetized. So the dice tray is held in position by magnets, and it comes together in the most satisfying way ever.
Yeah, it slides and is held shut by the magic of magnets as well, and makes
How
a
did
nice.
It work?
Yeah, how do I was trying to make it through without that. Thank you. Yes. So Heavy Play coming soon to your LGS, or you could shop now at heavyplay.com and use code the Dive Down 2023 for 10% off your first order. If you do use that code, it lets Randy know that you heard about it from us. Heavyplay.com.
What are we doing this week, Stan?
Well, we're finally wrapping up our picks to click from Wilds of Eldraine. And we ask each other once and for all, guys, what does it take for a set to actually be interesting?
I don't understand why you guys would want to talk about that this week, but okay.
I don't know if, we might not.
We'll try.
We'll see.
Eventually, we're just going to get so frustrated at these cards that we're forced to discuss.
Wow. Really incentivizing people to, really incentivizing people to stay for the whole download. You're really going to kill our engagement metrics.
I mean, I will say, I think that there's some surprises in here.
Yeah.
I think there's some decent things to discuss, but
I think there's a few cards that we just straight up missed once again because they were spoiled so early that we didn't talk about them.
You went back to the vaults, huh?
Yeah, I think there's a couple we should go back for a little bit and just discuss. So
yeah, I'll also point out, like I was pasting cards in the sheet, and Shane was still like, "Stan, you're being way too generous to the set." Like I didn't even leave a note. I was just like, "Oh, Moonshaker Cavalry," and Shane's like DMing me like, "Come on, man, don't put cavalries in our notes."
Moonshaker Cavalry?
I'm assuming that's the one he was looking at.
Should we start with? Let's start with Moonshaker Cavalry. It's on Stan's list. He's got it there. It costs.
We got Housekeep first, though.
No, well, I guess we do. Go ahead.
All right, let's housekeep before we moonshake the cavalry. New patron to join the Dive Down Nation, Pixel Hero. Hello. Thank you for your support.
Pixel H.
Yeah, pixel.h.
P Hero.
P.
Pharaoh.
Stanislav, do you say H yet?
Only if I want the locals to understand me.
Is that? Do you use that when you're asking for macaroni and cheese?
When I have to talk to my HR manager.
My hatcheroni.
Yeah, that's right. If you'd like to support the Dive Down for hilarious pronunciation guides about British letters and American letters, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can even support us by getting some swag for yourself over at our store at thedivedown.com/store. Heck, you can even support us while playing Magic Online with Mana Traders using promo code TheDiveDown2023. Gets you 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And of course, there's Barrister and Man for your shaving needs and grooming products, fragrances, and more. Use promo code TheDiveDown23 to get 15% off your first order from Barrister and Man. And then there's NRG. Nerd Rage Gaming gives you 8% off your order of paper Magic cards using promo code DIVE8. Those are our friends and sponsors. Thank you to all of our friends and sponsors, future, past, and existing supporters of the show.
Speaking of supporters of the show, Stanislav, you're one of our biggest
frequent guests,
and for that,
I've always said this.
I'm gonna let's like Dave said, let's give you first dibs on card you want to talk about.
Well, so this is one that I think falls into Dave's bucket of like they were spoiled so early we never talked about it, and that's Moonshaker Cavalry.
I mean, I think there's other reasons we didn't talk about it, but go ahead.
Well, you know what? I want to get into that. I know what you're saying, Shane. I can read between your sardonic lines, and I want to discuss that.
Your sardonic lines is my favorite New Order song.
They're mank.
Sometimes you really nail one. I felt like that one was really good.
Moonshaker Cavalry, 5 white. That's
a lot of
8 mana. Yes, it's a creature, spirit knight. It flies. It's a 6/6, and it has some text. When Moonshaker Cavalry enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is a
good commander card.
You just took the words out of my mouth. It's a good commander card, isn't it?
But
anyone else who plays this, I think, in our formats is doing something broken. And I think, Shane, when you were making your sardonic lines, it's because like this isn't the type of card that tends to see play. And it's just, why not? Why are cards, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why do cards like this not excite us anymore?
Because
why are we so hardened and cold?
Because it costs 8. And like, so like if you're doing something that costs 8, typically you're probably playing like a really, annoying control deck. And you play your Pearl Lake Ancient, and like you sort of finish the game with that, or you like untap your Hall of the Spirit Giants or whatever, and you kill with that over a few turns. And I think what's tempting is to compare this to like Craterhoof Behemoth, right? Yeah. So it's like the white Craterhoof Behemoth.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm looking at Craterhoof Behemoth right now as well.
And it's much better.
Is it?
And because it's in green,
yeah,
which is the color of Ramp, the color of Mana Dorks, and Craterhoof Behemoth has haste.
Itself.
Which means when you
has haste.
Itself. Yeah. When you cast Craterhoof Behemoth, you are likely killing. This doesn't even guarantee a kill at 8 mana. Whereas if you're playing Craterhoof and you're ramping into it with Mana Dorks, and then you go ham, it's like, well, I've, GG's. Whereas I feel like this is a top end for a deck that would take, it's potentially challenging to get to even cast it, and that doesn't even necessarily kill. So it's like, I can see it in, Commander, like you said, Stan, where it's like, that's where you can get excited because you just play a different game.
What about we played this with a bunch of like Mana Dorks and Token Makers and Raise the Alarms and Cryptolith Rites.
Some Selesnya tokens action going back to the well.
Yeah, Selesnya tokens, all of your creatures tap for mana, you make a lot of tokens, and then you play Moonshaker Cavalry and then
like with March of the Multitudes or something like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this card is noteworthy because the other effect that's in Pioneer that is sort of like this is bad. Like the one Decimator of the Provinces or whatever, the one that's the I forget what that mechanic's called, is not as good as Craterhoof Behemoth, and this is mostly Craterhoof Behemoth, and it even gives better evasion, right? Even though it's in the wrong colors, and so maybe someone will find out some kind of broken thing to do with it. I think that is true. So there's a new like broken top end of your creature chain if you want to get there, and that card's Moonshaker Cavalry, and we should just earmark it and recognize that it's around in Pioneer.
I mean, I'm glad this card exists because I think it's like $20-something, and so it's just going to take some pressure off of other cards we might want to play.
There's other cards you want to play out of this set? There's cards you want to play out of this set? Okay.
There's a few.
Well, why don't you should we just do this around and around? We don't have to go in order, right? Shane, why don't you tell us one of the cards you want to play from this set?
Well, okay, that I want to play. That Shane wants to play. Yeah. Let's talk about this.
What are you buying, Shane? Where are your stonks?
Man, I don't know if I have any stonks in this set. I have to be full disclosure. I don't know. But let's talk about. Do you want to talk about Elusive Otter now? Let's just get a decent card out of the way. I think we all kind of want to talk about this card. So let's just do it now. Elusive Otter. It's a single blue mana for a creature -otter, and it has it's a 1/1. That's not very good, Shane, but it has prowess. So it gets a +1/+1 until end of turn when you cast a non-creature spell. Creatures with power less than Elusive Otter's power can't block it. And it has an adventure thing too. Grove's Bounty for XG sorcery. And Grove's Bounty says distribute X 1/1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So, this was almost definitely a merfolk, right? Before it got retconned into like an otter. Like this is Merfolk 101.
Why?
It just seems like, it's in blue-green and has prowess. It puts counters on creatures. It just seems like it would go into
There's not a ton of Merfolk out there with prowess, bro.
Well, make it given a prowess. Well, there's a lot of otters with prowess.
Is this like an otter
thing? That's a good point. So, this is... 1/1 is bad, but this is also cheap. But I think importantly... in terms of adventure design, this is good late and good early.
I agree. I think you would think that I would be excited about this card, given my historical relationship to prowess.
It's not in red, though.
I don't really... I'm only butting in here because I want to establish context. You are imagining this as a card that's good enough for Pioneer, or you are imagining that this is a card that's good enough for Modern?
This will never see Modern.
I agree. That's why I'm not excited about this card, because I like prowess in Modern. I don't love it in Pioneer. So please continue.
Yeah, that's all I have. It's like it's going to go into some kind of decks. If you play Arena, I absolutely 100% guarantee you will see this on day one of playing when this set drops. people will be playing with Elusive Otter somewhere. Maybe it goes into Merfolk. Maybe it's just like, who cares if this is out of Merfolk?
Merfolk in Pioneer?
I mean,
yeah, I mean, like, there's like janky, Simic, Merfolk type stuff.
there's the blue, the Ixalan Merfolk are the base.
Yeah. So did we think that this slots into red-blue prowess in Pioneer? Like, is there mana to support?
That's a problem too with this card, right? Is like, it's not an is it. So what deck is playing like this in a blue-green shell?
I mean, it can go in the is it deck. Go ahead, Stan.
Well, to Shane's point with Merfolk, like, is there a better one-drop Merfolk in Pioneer? Like, let's talk about the play patterns
play
here, right?
a lot
like,
of spells, though. That's my
it can
thing.
do whatever it wants, babe.
That's a good point.
It can play a dive down. There's a Merfolk on the art. But my point here is, though, that the play pattern that this kind of sets up is interesting, right? Because, like, you can just play it on turn 1, and then you have this scaling threat, and then if you draw it late in the game, then you have Grove's Bounty that can potentially distribute 1/1 tokens at sorcery speed, but maybe you can line up like a killing line. And I'm not sure that Merfolk has any other cards that are A, that versatile, or B, that are good enough as early threats that can scale the way a prowess creature can.
I mean, I do want to say that, like, even though I mentioned Merfolk, like, the reason that Merfolk are decent is because they have lords. So, like, your 1/1, green Merfolk becomes like 3/3 permanently without having to like cast spells. So it's more resilient to removal. Things like, it blocks better, it attacks better. And Elusive Otter is not going to do those same things. And then I look at Grove's Bounty again, even though I put this on the list and brought it up, and I'm like, is Grove's Bounty even that good late? Like, let's say you have like 5 mana in like your aggressive creature deck, right? And then you put 4 1/1 counters. I guess it's like, if you're going tall, maybe that's cool. Like, you just like have like a real big beater.
Well, you put them all on your other Elusive Otter that's already in play. Like, that's what you're thinking about with this. I still think we're probably underrating this in the traditional prowess Pioneer shell. Like, I'm looking at Merfolk right now in Pioneer for what it's worth, and there's like no results for it even in
it's not
anything since, like, I see one person streamed it in like March of this year, and I'm kind of looking at the deck right now. They all have Benthic Biomancer as their 1-drop, which is an adapt card. It's a 1/1. They got Deep Root Elite. Like, there are a lot of Merfolk, but I feel like this is much more still. I would be like, I'm going to put a single Stomping Ground and a single Breeding Pool in my red-blue prowess deck. And like, hey, if I get to cast Grove's Bounty later, it's great. If I don't, this is still a good 1-drop in Pioneer to go with Swift Spear and Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, you're probably right. Just like do like a light green splash for like late game Grove's Bounty type stuff.
Yeah, and it's good to power up your creatures later. It gives them all a prowess trigger. Plus, they get the +1 counters from whatever you manage to do it. You can do a prowess trigger for this for a single green, which isn't great, but it is a bailout if you need a little bit of extra pull. So like, I think that this card is a prowess card. But, I don't know if it makes that deck come back or makes any kind of impression on that deck enough right now to make it good again. Because it was good like 6 months ago.
Would be nice to have some Manamorphose in Pioneer.
That'll never happen.
I know, it's messed up.
All right, I think that's all I need to say about Otter. Unless you all think that this is a card worth spending 5 more minutes on.
No.
All right, Dave, what do you got?
All right. One card that I want to talk about off the top, and this is something that we have faced some pressure from certain constituencies in the Dive Down Nation to talk about more. And here's the card. It's Devouring Sugarmaw. It's 2 colorless, black for a creature horror, menace, trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. If you don't tap Devouring Sugarmaw, you get a 6/6 for all of that. And then the adventure side is called Have for Dinner, which is a hilarious title. And it's as generic and a white. It's an adventure, and it creates a 1/1 human creature token and a food token. Do you all know where I'm going with this card? Or where this card is probably going?
I read your notes, so I do know.
So
this card
I read the notes.
Is getting some hype from people who like to play the number 3 Cascade deck in Modern, Glimpse of Tomorrow. That's right. We're talking about Glimpse of Tomorrow on this podcast. First time since Ryan Donkin was on many months ago. But so I asked Kilgore Jason from our Discord a little bit about this because he's a big fan of the deck, trying to understand exactly why people are so excited about this. And he said the real reason is that they're the only card that costs more than 2 mana, so it doesn't get cascaded into and makes 2 tokens somehow, is that card from Horizons called Wave Sifter, which makes 2 clue tokens. Okay. So what this really is it's a 2 mana card that you can't cascade into that makes 2 tokens, so that when you do cascade into Glimpse of Tomorrow, you have a ton of extra tokens. That's what this card is.
This makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just, cool. Sweet.
And it's pretty simple. I think that's what it is. There's also some talk about another card called Gumdrop Poisoner, which I won't talk about, but I'll just say really quickly, it's a 3 CMC card that makes a token for a single black, so that you can potentially have a Glimpse deck that has like Grief in it. So there's a lot of people that are starting to mess around with these cards in order to make Glimpse Tomorrow better. And that's the long and the short of it. I think it's pretty sure. It sounds like it's pretty sure that this card will see play in the deck. It's just a question of whether the build will change enough to become the black one or not. Because the best draws, just to be clear again, is here's what Jason told me the best opening hands in Glimpse are. You have a Colony Garden and a Wave Sifter, so then you have 6 game object Glimpse. And this can help you have a backup plan for that. And that's that. Thoughts, concerns? What do we think about Glimpse?
Haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't played against it in what feels like a year. But I believe that every new cheap token maker that it can also be like a big insane threat probably just continues to make that deck
makes sense to me too.
Potentially stronger.
Yeah.
It has nowhere to go but up.
Rule of 8 stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, you want a double token maker? Here's another one. That's helpful too. Makes your best draws better, more frequent. No, Wave Sifter is a blue and a green.
Wave Sifter is free though, right?
Do the evoke
isn't
cost.
it an evoke elemental?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is like a slam dunk modern playable.
Yeah, just because of that particular deck. But I do think it fits.
Yeah.
Stan, what do you want to go next?
What do I want? Let's talk about the other otter.
Can we talk about how annoyed I am that we have an otter that has prowess and we have an otter that doesn't have prowess but has the instant sorcery text on it? I extremely do not get that.
It's so weird. Like, why would it have only instant and sorcery instead of
because they're worried about us
spell?
casting?
Why?
Yeah, Mishra's Ball. They're like, we can give you one prowess card in this set, but we can't give you 2.
Yeah, but this one won't see play in Modern even if it had prowess. Stan, which card is this?
It's called Frolicking Familiar. 2U, Otter Wizard, flying 2/2. When you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then it has an adventure called Blow Off Steam. Single red for an instant. It deals 1 damage to any target. So for one, I think Blow Off Steam is better than the weird green token thing. Like, I think this is a better adventure.
Yeah.
I reluctantly agree. I think they're actually pretty close, but I think you're probably right that just damage is probably better than the tricky token thing. And also, the other thing that makes this better is this is an instant, and the green one is not.
Also importantly, this is classic adventure design, which is you curve into Frolicking Familiar. You do not really curve from add tokens with an X spell into your single blue mana otter as often.
That's right. All of the adventures I've selected for this episode stuck out to me because of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
where do you like this?
I don't know where I like it. I just think it's neat. I mean, that's how I feel about all these cards. I just think they're neat. Maybe I might like drafting them. I think the fact that this curves correctly is important. I like the fact that the creature end is a flyer, a 2/2 flyer that scales up. Like, it clearly wants to be in a creature deck, so it's probably attacking for 3 or more every turn. I also think 1 damage is not insignificant. Like, we see people play what's the lava spike that has the MDFC lava Spikefield Hazard. We see people play Spikefield Hazard. It's the fact that exiles, I think, is probably only really relevant against like the cat oven decks. Maybe occasionally you can like tag a Croxa with it if you're being really clever. But this being like a pinger that then turns into a decent bodied creature means like maybe it's enough. if nothing else, I just think it's neat.
Yeah. Here, all I see when I look at the 3 mana cost 2/2 flyer with like semi prowess is, Dave, what was that card that people were using for a bit? Was that from M20? Like the flyer that's scryed or whatever?
Stormwing Entity.
Yeah, this just looks like a Stormwing Entity to me.
Which actually I think is pretty good. So Stormwing Entity, if you look in Pioneer, there's a number of the most recent round of prowess decks that are that were playing Stormwing Entity. I'm looking at, and like maybe that goes in, maybe that stays out. Here's one from, I'm looking at one from May 27th, 2023 that has like your third path Iconoclast. It has Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. It has Kenra Spellspear. Remember that card from March of the Machines. I think that there's a chance that just given that this is removal on one side and a threat on the back with evasion, that it could potentially replace one or more of those cards that are at the top end of this deck, depending on how you want to build it. In my heart, I kind of think the other Otter's better, but maybe this one is the one that's good.
You know what it is about this card? I think I figured it out while you were speaking, David. This is the type of card that would make me play a dinky standard deck on Arena if it like was built around cards like this.
Sure. Yeah.
You see where I'm getting at?
This is the kind of card that would make me play a dinky prowess deck in real life, or in Pioneer is what I meant. But yeah, I like it.
I'm just going to hijack. Can I hijack? Can we talk about one more card? Please?
Sure.
Because it's on theme. Scalding Viper.
How is this on
Which
theme?
is actually...
I guess it's an adventure.
Is it an adventure card?
Yeah.
God.
No, it's an otter.
Otter Viper.
Scalding Viper, creature elemental otter.
Aren't otters the things that kill snakes?
No, that's a mongoose, bro.
Oh, thank you. Well, they're kind of similar. They're
Shane.
tubish.
Shane, wake
They're
up.
tubish. They're weaselish, I think is the word you were looking for.
Oh, I like tubes.
Okay. Scalding Viper.
1 in a red for an elemental snake. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, Scalding Viper deals 1 damage to that player, and it is a 2/1. And then it has an adventure called Steam Clean. 1 in a blue for a sorcery. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand.
So you like this card, right? You're high on this.
I do. I do like this card. I actually, like I said, I think this might be my favorite of the adventure cards.
Tell me why.
So I think even though like the adventure and the creature are the same cost, you can curve them out however you want. Like if you need the creature ASAP, you can play the creature ASAP. If you need a little disruption, you have like some reasonably costed disruption. It's petty theft, right? Like I think it's the exact same text.
It is not the exact same text. Can I tell you why?
That's a sorcery.
Oh no. Well, it's sorcery, but also doesn't petty theft only target opponents?
Correct. You can bounce your own stuff with this if you want to. But but since it's a sorcery, that's not very good on this card. But it's still worth noting. You can bounce your own stuff with this.
Yeah. It being sorcery actually is something that lowers my rating of it. But even then, even so, the text, whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, it deals 1 damage to that player. Like, I think that's better than it reads. Like, I think that it's like, that can do like 3 damage a game easily. Probably more.
I mean,
against every deck.
I mean, Eidolon exists and doesn't see a ton of play, even in,
However, this is asymmetrical. It's not both players.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like...
Oh, Eidolon is 3 or less.
Yes. I feel like both halves of this are not what I want. Meaning, let's say it had, even if it had 2 toughness, but like it's a pretty rough... the snake does not going to do enough. The Steam Clean being a sorcery and being 2 mana, like why couldn't this? I feel like this could almost be fair as like a 1 mana sorcery because or like have some kind of more restrictions on the permanent, like permanent 3 mana value or less. So it's sort of like a symmetrical on the the creature and the adventure side, just to like give you have more early game action with the Steam Clean.
What are you, game developer now?
Yeah, I'm a really good card designer, Dave. Do you know that?
Yeah, I kind of like this card. Stan, I read it originally. I was like, I don't like this, and then you put it in the spoiler list, and I am kind of warming up to it a little bit. I certainly don't think this has a home in Modern. So this becomes a question of like, is this something that you can do in Pioneer to leverage, like Eidolon. Maybe you play like an 8 Eidolon deck or that kind of thing, or something. I don't know, but what were you thinking, Stan? This is just I think it's neat kind of space.
Yes, everything in the set is I think it's neat space. Let's set
Let's
that,
leave that
as the foundation. I mean, this goes in that same dinky standard deck that would get me to play standard on Arena, I guess.
Yeah. It certainly feels like the 2 otters and this could be like a deck that you do play together in standard with a bunch of just like
little
adventures
family.
And
yeah. It does feel like the card that Shane was describing would probably exist in the original Eldraine, and this is sort of like another example of them being extra cautious around adventure design.
Oh, it'd be instant in the original. It'd be a better petty theft somehow.
Right. All right, Shane, what do you want to talk about?
All right. Oh, go ahead. No, Stan, you got some more? I'm still looking, so you talk while I'm looking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is just like my little soapbox where it feels like this, if you can call it the success of the original Eldraine, has kind of like made this set weaker, at least.
Oh, definitely.
On paper.
Yeah,
and
they're so afraid.
I find that really disappointing. Yeah, they're so afraid because like that deck needed half the set had it to be banned, and like they revisited it, but now they're like extra cautious. And I think in that situation, everyone loses because the cards are a little less exciting, makes them less likely to see play in the formats that we care about, at least. And I don't know, like you can pull back too much too. Like maybe going the same power level as original Eldraine wasn't the answer, but like pulling all the way back, I don't think that serves anyone all that well. But maybe I'm being biased.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about that really quickly, just my thought on that is that they probably here's how I would think about this, like hierarchically going through what maybe happened is. I imagine that when they thought about the standard environment that Eldraine made the first time, they realized that adventures were a big problem of it, right? Like they were all kind of warping. Bone Crusher Giant's the worst one, of course. So they look at this set and they go, well, we have to make all the adventures worse so that the standard environment that includes Eldraine, it's not like they could have one card that was a modern playable adventure. You know what I mean? Because it would destroy standard. So they were kind of like, well, adventure just has to be completely nerfed this time around so that the standard environment around it is fun, but it has to be all of them or nothing, basically. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not sure that I personally agree with this notion that like standard can't just be about adventures again. Like it's been 4 or 5 years, and now that we have the longer standard rotation cycle, part of the reason that they stated that they're extending the rotation cycle is to give them more flexibility to print cards that respond to existing standards. Yeah. So if they find themselves in a situation where they made something a little too strong, now they actually have the opportunity to address it dead on without having to actually ban something, but by actually printing something that does so. So
yeah,
I understand you're just a talking head right now, Dave, but I disagree.
Can I continue?
People tune in for the controversy, so it's all right. Shane, what do you got?
I've got another adventure. I'm going to do a quick twofer probably, and they're both adventures actually.
Okay.
So, because one I don't think is that discussable. It's Hearth Elemental, 5 and a red for a 4/5 elemental. Shane, that sounds bad, but wait, there's more. The spell costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard that are instant, sorcery, and or have an adventure. That's some clumsy text. There's also an adventure, Stoke Genius, for 1 and a red sorcery. You discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. Then it's an adventure zone. So Stoke Genius might dredge.
I mean, it certainly can dredge. It's a card that's written for in a dredge type thing.
But you know what else is a card called Dangerous Wager, which I believe was in SOI.
Avacyn Restored.
Avacyn Restored, thank you. It's even older. That little set symbol always confuses me.
Yeah, so this card is not in Pioneer, like but it is in Dangerous Wager. Exactly.
So, but that's at instant speed. And no one dredged with that, right? So, like, the benefit here is Hearth Elemental. And you could probably cast this fairly cheaply. Like, dredge usually runs about 20 instant sorceries, etc. But is that enough of a benefit where you're like, hey, I'm getting like sort of an Ox of Agonis type thing, right? Where I discard my hand, I can dredge off it, and then probably pretty quickly I have a 4/5 on the board next turn or something like that. And it's like, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. It's easier to cast on Thrilling Discovery. You don't have to stretch into white. I think it's the only reason that deck stretches into white, because now it sort of has the blue for that one card that's escaping me. So that's a little Ox of Agonis joke, by the way.
Yeah, the one card that's escaping me.
Yes.
Wow, good job. I've never dredged, but I agree that the fact that nobody seemed to ever experiment with Dangerous Wager makes me think that this is probably not it. Yeah,
it's just kind of a non-starter.
But I mean, I have seen people excited about this. Like, I was looking at other people's spoiler reactions. I think Devin had this card in in the video that he put up on YouTube recently that has kind of like another batch of cards that he liked from Eldraine. I also feel like I've seen other people talk about it on Twitter. To me, I guess a 4/5 is for 1 mana. Is that useful in Dredge? Is maybe what they're thinking, because that's the only thing they have to be thinking in order to
always helps to clock
this.
people.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be the biggest creature in Dredge?
I mean, Ox has counters.
Ox is a 5/3 when it comes back in.
I see.
It's a 4/2 and then a 5. But I will say, I do think that the extra toughness can, of course, be maybe more useful than the extra power.
Sure.
Because it's a little more resilient. It's harder to get off the board. People are willing to trade things into an Ox. I don't know. Like, Dredge has been gone for so long that I guess I could see this body being just better than Ox and some combination of Ox and Thrilling Discovery. But I had the same feeling, Shane, when I read this card, and then I looked around on Scryfall because I was like, I'm sure this text exists. Discard your hand and draw 2 cards. I was like, what else has this been printed on? And then I found it, and then I saw in the notes that you had found it as well, and I was just like, if nobody ever tried this before, like, this effect is not that. Maybe this effect is not that great.
Yeah, like
Dredge,
discarding your whole hand is ostensibly seems good in Dredge, but there are some cards you might want to keep, like, a follow-up draw spell or something like that. So I don't know. Yeah. I think people will try it. I don't think it breaks Dredge wide open again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's the other card that you have?
And then the other one, Questing Druid.
Yes.
This is a 1/1 human druid for 1 and a green. And whenever you cast a spell that is white, blue, black, or red, so everything but green, you put a 1/1 counter on Questing Druid. I don't remember ever seeing text like that before.
Quirion Dryad
is
the effect of that.
So, Shane, that sounds bad, but there's also an adventure part. Seek the Beast, 1 and a red. You exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until your next end step, you may play those cards. So, this is not like blowing my socks off, knocking my socks off, blowing my mind. But I think it's just flexible enough to see play in Adventure Pioneer, or Jund Adventures, maybe Decadent Dragon, some of the old strong Eldraine Adventure cards, maybe some of the other cards in this set. I think there's just enough going on here. Or Questing Druid seems pretty good, seems pretty flexible, but I don't know. It's not an astounding card. I think it's a decent card.
I think this is a good card, personally.
Yeah, it's a good card.
Yeah, and this is one of the cards that I was referring to when I said we need to go back and talk about some of the cards that were spoiled really early that we just didn't even think about last week. Because this is a card that is a good adventure. It has a good spell on the front. It gives a little bit of card draw to a red-green deck. If you have a Questing Druid in play and you play Seek the Beast, then it gets a counter off of it. So there's a little bit of internal synergy with multiples of this card. And I don't know. I think this is just a reasonable card. Like you said, for Pioneer, probably some kind of mid-range. I don't think you have to play it with a bunch of other adventures and stuff like that. I think this could just go in some kind of mid-range deck, personally. But
that's all I got. Go ahead, Dave.
Can I talk about another adventure since we're continuing down this path? The other card that I thought we kind of overlooked because it was spoiled so early is Mosswood Dreadknight, which is 1 and a green for a 3/2 with trample, which is pretty good stats for 1 and a green. And then it says, when Mosswood Dreadknight dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. And its adventure is called Dread Whispers, which is a colorless and a black for a sorcery that says you may draw a card and you lose 1 life. So this is a card where you can cast the adventure, cast the creature. When the creature dies, you can recast the adventure and then cast the creature again. So it's like an animatable, I think it's a reanimatable threat, basically.
The way it's worded, I can't tell if you're casting Dread Whispers from the yard or you're just casting the Human Knight.
You're
again
casting
from
Dread
the yard.
Whispers. That's what as an adventure means. I think. Yeah, as an adventure.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting. This is a slow card.
Yeah.
This is like, in like the Grim Flare Golgari mid-range style of deck, but it definitely does grind.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. Obviously, the timing's a little weird because it's a sorcery, but I mean, the idea that you can decide which way you want to go with it, and you don't lose access to the adventure when you play it as a creature because you get to do it again, or you just get to cast it over and over again, I think is pretty interesting and cool.
And you're getting 2 cards off that adventure when you're playing it from the yard, right? Because you're getting the card from Whispers, and then you also have the creature to back it up.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think there's a deck.
It's draw 2, but you always get a Mosswood Dreadknight.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think this card has a home exactly right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that it clearly goes into, but I do think, again, if we're thinking about Pioneer Jund, Pioneer mid-range, like that kind of stuff, I think this could be a good card to help that archetype get a little better.
Yeah, I think it's a neat card. It's not blowing the doors off the house, but I think it's got potential.
All right. So
there's a lot of adventures we actually talked about this. Like, I think we've talked mostly about adventures after saying they're kind of crappy.
Yep. Turns out there's some good ones. So
we just had to back up our explanation for why we think they're crappy by reading them out and discussing them and showing a little bit of hope and promise anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still an adventure. It's still a 2-for-1. It's still, it still has 2 cards on one that you don't have to choose between them usually. So,
all right.
Stan.
Since everybody else did a 2-for-1, can I do a 2-for?
Oh, please.
Real quickly?
Yeah, please.
Can we talk about Thunderous Debut? Let's talk about Bargain instead.
Our first episode.
Yeah. Thunderous Debut. Let's talk about Thought Scour. Thunderous Debut, 6 colorless green for a sorcery. It has Bargain. Look at the top 20 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them. If this spell was bargained, put the revealed cards onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put the revealed cards into your hand, then shuffle.
Yeah.
Storm the Festival number 5 and 6 was kind of my thought when I looked at this card.
What are you sacrificing to it?
You're sacrificing either Oath of Nissa or the ramp spell.
Oh, yeah.
The ramp enchantment. So there's 8 enchantments. Yeah. There's 8 enchantments in that deck that you can sacrifice to this, and not without even looking at some of the other things that maybe are possible to sacrifice to it as well. But it felt like, okay, so there's some internal synergy there. The cards are already there. If you want to have a few more Nixthos payoffs in mono green, this 20 cards deep is definitely deeper than the 5 cards deep that you get off of Storm the Festival. I'm not saying this would replace Storm the Festival, because that card is absurdly good, of course. But maybe if you want a couple more and you want to be able to go get an Ulamog and not care, if you want to be able to go get your Cityscape Leveler and not care, because I have seen a couple listed of Cityscape Leveler in them. Like, you get to up the mana value of a couple of your payoffs if you go the deck with the deck like this. To me, I don't know about cheating this into play any other way. The other thing that I was thinking about with this is, like, is this card kind of like Creativity at all? Like, is it some version of a Creativity? But I don't think there's a way to cheat this card into play cheaply. But you could use it to get 2 combo pieces if you wanted to go that way as well, regardless of their CMC. So if you wanted to go and get, a couple of things that are creatures that turn your team into all 20/20 hasters, being able to dig 20 to do that is pretty good, but I think the casting cost is prohibitive there, which makes me think this is only possible for like a Nixthos deck.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you have to pay 8 instead of 6 for Storm the Festival. I know that seems innocuous, even in mono green ramp, but it's still more. But like you said, the benefit is super deep and the mana value doesn't matter. So you can reflex your deck a little bit. So
yeah,
I see the pros and cons here.
Yeah, but I do think it's an interesting, big, splashy green card, and we do generally skip talking about them, but I think this one was worth spending a minute on.
Is there a set that we will not be like, hey, this artifact could see play in mono green Planeswalkers? This gigantic green creature could see play in mono green Planeswalker Wishboard? It's just like, man, there's always something, and I don't know how frequently it's actually been panning out recently, because the deck is just good.
Yeah,
as is.
The deck's good, but there's always something. It's not like we talked about Storm the Festival at the time that we did a good job talking about that when that card came out. So, Stan, it's your turn.
Well, I don't know if this is as good as Storm the Festival or Thunderous Debut for that matter, but let's talk about Regal Bunnicorn. Kind of an interesting little 2-drop. It's a 1 and a white for a rabbit unicorn. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of non-land permanents you control. So it's a star.
Stanislav, when you were in like grade school, were people still reading Bunnicorn, the little trade paperbacks? He was like,
Is that a thing?
I'm just thinking of Bunnicula.
Is this a bit?
It's a bit.
I was going to say, are you talking? Yeah, Bunnicula.
Bunnicula. He was a vampire rabbit. He sucked the stuff out of the vegetables,
out of carrots,
white
right?
husks.
Yeah.
I don't remember Bunnicula. Oh, it's like a bunny Dracula.
Do you remember Bunnicorn though? Okay, I mean Bunnicorn.
I barely do, and you just read the card to me. Tell me why this is good, if it's good.
I just think it's neat. Here's why it is. Because it doesn't have to be a board full of creatures. It could just be a board full of stuff.
I mean, that's the only reason it's good, I think, too.
I think that's certainly noteworthy. I don't know. Like, isn't this like kind of an interesting alternative to a creature in auras that's like big, even if you don't have a bunch of auras on it, and like you just kind of have like 2 big bodies because you've suited up one?
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Yeah, you do get like weird things like the I forget the Amonkhet card name. What's it called? Cartouche of Solidarity, where you get a token and you get an aura, so you get 2 for 1 there, and then maybe your Bunnicorn gets bigger, and then maybe sometimes you suit up the Bunnicorn, and then it's big and it counts the aura and it counts itself, so you get that like plus effect, double basically from playing an aura on it. So maybe, I could see that being a thing that gives you a different access to attack on there, because sometimes auras and stuff like that, you do have a problem breaking through with a big threat when you just have a bunch of 1/1s or tokens or cartouches or the stuff that's sort of like is supposed to be the grease of your deck and not really the threats.
Yeah, I think it's sort of tempting to compare this to Tarmogoyf for a lot of people, because it's just it's a star where it's like equal to the number of something. But the reason that Goyf at least used to work, I think, is because it synergized with what the deck was doing, right? Like you're killing things, you're casting spells, you're fetching with your fetch lands, et cetera, right? And so Goyf was just sort of naturally big. And this is a payoff card in a very different way. So I think the floor is a lot lower than Goyf. And Shane, you say like, well, what if someone attacks your graveyard? And like, well, they shouldn't be doing that against Tarmogoyf in the first place. But, it's not something that happens as frequently. Whereas people can be killing your creatures or attacking your permanents in some way. And so I think the floor is lower, but the ceiling I think is there for sure. But it's also kind of like my deck's already doing what it's supposed to be doing. So it's just sort of like, is it win more, or is it just like, it's a good permanent if my deck is doing at all what it's supposed to be doing? And I think that you can have 6 one, half dozen the other, or, it's sort of a weird scale where it's like, hey, simply because my deck is doing what it's doing doesn't mean I can't make that better, right? There's a lot of decks that only win when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and more permanents that help with that could be good. So I think this could see play on like Boros Convoke potentially. Like you're not reliant on like a Boros Convoke, a Convoke creature, but like you're still taking advantage of the wide board. Where it's still just like, hey, here's a cheap, efficient threat that when my deck is doing what it's doing, it makes it a little bit better if I can find the space for it.
Brilliant. That's such a great call. I forgot about the Convoke deck.
Yeah, I like this card in that kind of idea too, just because there's so many things that make multiple permanents there.
All right, I got something. I think this card will see play. I don't know how much, but Royal Treatment. It's a green instant. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Create a Royal Roll token attached to that creature, which is the one that gives it +1/+1 and Ward 1. So this means this is like a green slip out the black with Ward 1. Cheap sideboard card. We'll see play somewhere. Probably.
So, yeah. It's interesting. I wonder if it just kind of, because the buff is permanent, if we kind of have it replace... it gives hexproof until the end of the turn, so that's good. And then in the future, it has extra protection, right? So just so you know, not that it matters because this card gives hexproof, but if you give something Ward 1 at instant speed that doesn't do anything to something that's already targeted it, just keep that in mind. But this card gives hexproof, so it did make me wonder a little bit if this kind of replaces what's the card from a Kaladesh that saw some play in Infect? Gives +2/+2 and hexproof. Or indestructible defense? Blossom. Yeah, it's kind of like a blossoming defense where you get to keep the buff forever. So I feel like, in those kind of strategies, maybe there's a chance that this is good because it gives you the extra ward problem for a while.
Yeah. Again, it's not mind-blowing. I think it's solid.
Yeah. But I do think this is the kind of pump card that could be main deck, not necessarily something that is...
Oh, sure. Like, depending on the strategy.
Sideboard, yeah. Yeah, that's probably one of the best roll cards as well, I think, too. Like, I don't know if there are a ton that are better than that, but this one that gives ward, does it at instant speed, gives hexproof, all that kind of stuff, I think is nice. All right. Let's see. So I have a weird card to talk about. So I have two cards to talk about real quick. One is Quick Study, which is 2 generic and a blue for an instant, which just says draw 2 cards. I mean, people have talked about this idea a lot of times. Like, what if Divination was just an instant? Would that be playable? And I'm like, I still don't think so.
What if Divination was an instant?
Also, I would like to note that there's a funny exchange in the notes here between me and Stan where I think I literally fell asleep writing the notes for this card. And my notes on this say, many have tried and all have failed. I haven't quit believing, but this... I haven't quit believing, but this ... And Stan's response is, I'm right there with you, David. Now, I'd like to know what you thought you were with me there on, where I don't know what I was thinking when I typed this up at 1 o'clock in the morning last night.
Oh, yeah, I was just very sleepy.
See, I think I was very sleepy.
The
sneh. And that's what this card does to you.
I'm right there with you that there's something here worth addressing. And maybe it's not that this card is good, but maybe it's like we actually have an instant speed true divination now. So divination is just
gone.
Is gone forever.
And also inspiration as well, which was a 4 mana instant speed draw 2. That card has also been outmoded now.
I think the question here is, when is this better than something like Treasure Cruise or Memory Deluge or Dig Through Time? Is it ever better than those cards? Like, I guess, like, if you don't have a graveyard, it's better than the Delve cards. It's one cheaper than Deluge, but Deluge gives you selection. Like, instant speed draw 2 is good. Like, we see instant speed draw 2 see play. We see sorcery speed draw 2 see play in expressive iteration. But is there any reason we would ever want this, though, for that effect?
I think at 3 mana, it's not good enough for constructed in any place we care about it, is kind of the moral of the story, regardless of if it's an instant or a sorcery, right? Unfortunately.
It's not playable.
I mean, this card is even more playable so this card is playable on a modal, where one of the modes is draw 2, and the other modes do other things. Like, that's Archmage's Charm, for example, has draw 2, and then also other modes at 3 mana. That's a playable card. But just straight up draw 2 for 3 is not really playable, I don't think.
I'm glad you brought this up, Dave. Is it just to say, hey, divination's better now and it's still not playable?
Pretty much. I mean, because people love draw cards and people love instant draw cards, and I think everybody was like, wow, divination just gone. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but it's an average card, and this is like also, I think, an average card as well.
Stanislav, I kind of want to talk about one of the cards you put on your list.
Please.
And it is another adventure. This is one I think we could talk a little bit about, because I see people say it's very good. I see people say it's not very good. I'm not sure where I stand. Woodland Acolyte, 2 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric. When an ETBs draw a card, okay, fine. And then it has an adventure. Mend the Wilds, green instant. You put target permanent card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is, again, another example, I think, of like the fixed adventures, where like the cheap spell is something you don't want to cast early. Like, you're not going to fill your curve with Mend the Wilds to like then go into Woodland Acolyte. You would want that more late game. But like the Acolyte side is what, like Wistful Selkie, like, 3 mana draw a card, NBD, not like the best thing in the world. But I think people are looking at the Mend the Wilds and saying like, okay, cool. Like, I can get something back from the graveyard on top of my library. It might be good in creature combo strategies because, permanent does not include spells. So this is not like an e-witness. It's not an e-wit effect. It doesn't get any card back, doesn't get a land, doesn't get a... no, actually it does get a land because it's permanent. It doesn't get spells. So that's really about it, is like, I think that this has some opportunity to like do something, but it's just like overall not ridiculously strong on either end. So you also can't like mess your opponent's draw up with the instant, like it's only your library.
I put something on there. So that would be something.
I think you're right that this is worse than Eternal Witness, which probably means
so.
I'm guessing like in Modern we would always rather play Eternal Witness, but in Pioneer, where we like the only real fetch we have is Fable, Mend the Wilds, like you're so rarely getting actual lands from it. So what are we getting? Yeah. What permanents are we getting with Mend the Wilds in Pioneer other than just like a creature to have gas? Like it's just probably just G instant draw a creature card from your yard.
I mean, you can get an adventure back. You can, because those are creatures, right? So you could get an adventure that you like and cast and used and died, and you can get that, start that whole thing rolling again.
But my point though, that it just gives it a little less utility. Like it actually narrows what this card can get based on the format that we're playing it in. If the format that we're playing it in seldom puts lands into the graveyard.
Yeah.
I do think it's like actually pretty good though. A 3-drop that draws a card, instant speed, put something from your graveyard on top of your library. Could be good.
It's very safe. Like I wish they would like maybe buffed Woodland Acolyte a little bit, but like, Wistful Sulky is not a card I'm excited to play. I feel like Mend the Wilds is conditional. I think it has to be in a very specific deck, but I do think that like white-green are the colors where this deck would exist. So I think it can potentially do something. I don't think it's, it's not blowing my mind, but
what if it's just humans where you get a Lord back or one of your good payoff cards back after they kill it, and then you play this and it gets buffed by something, buffs your it gets buffed by Thalia's Lieutenant or something. I mean, this card's too expensive for like mono white humans, for example, so it'd be more of a different thing. But
yeah, I guess much like Stomp into Bone Crusher Giant, it's like, oh well, Stomp costs 2 mana and only does 2 damage, and it's like, well, it's because it's also stapled to a creature, and so it's like it's important for me to remind myself that hey, Mend the Wilds is also stapled to a creature that can get played and also draws another card. So like,
yeah, whoa. But just to be clear, I mean, yes, the front side of this does draw a card, but Mend the Wilds is not a card draw.
No. I meant the ETB of Woodland Acolyte. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's half of a card draw, David. Is that what people like to say?
I don't even think that. Yeah. I think it's half of a card draw because it's an adventure, but no other reason. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about how the previous adventures kind of defined Standard in a bad way at the time. The more we talk about the set, the more I feel like that's just going to happen again. It's just the adventures are just going to be weaker, but they're still going to be like, I'm guessing what Standard is going to be about, just because like having adventures on creatures is good.
Guys, let's take a quick break. Let's come back, finish up a few cards I think we might have left to talk about, kind of finish our thoughts about the set overall. So why don't you all stay with us?
Extra, read all about it. Soap's on sale.
Soaps on sale. Actually, a little bit more than soaps, but primarily Barrister Man has their hand and body soap. A bunch of the fragrances, it looks like about 15 or so, are on 25% off sale. Some of my favorite things, the Le Grand Chypre, La Vanille, Full Measure of Man, Waves. Oh man, you got to get the Waves. And also just a few of the aftershave splashes and things like that. But you guys love the soaps. You guys talk about the soaps a lot. And one of the things I want to say about the soaps is that I didn't even realize this, but these are vegan. They do not use any animal fats. So this is a vegetable bar soap. The palm oil is responsibly sourced and has certified origin. It has olive oil, avocado oil, moisturizing kupasu butter and goat milk powder. So I guess it's not vegan. I apologize. It's vegetarian. So this is just a extremely moisturizing, extremely like soft soap. I really like the soaps a lot too. What are your favorite smells of the soaps? Because I know we get a bunch from Will over at Barrister and Man.
I'm a big fan of Bay Rum.
That's there. It's on sale.
And Fern
On sale
as well. Those are my favorite of the soaps, in addition to just kind of this Seville and stuff like that. There's also the big things that are on like good clearance, like extreme clearance here on Will's
beard
site.
oil is too.
Yeah, there's an aftershave splash, Atomic Holiday aftershave splash, and
love that.
Red Letter Day aftershave splash is half off. The Atomic Holiday on is 3/4 off. It's $5 instead of $20. So if you want to get into some of that kind of stuff, it can be a good time to pick that up as well.
Yeah, Atomic Holiday is one of my just favorite fragrances. Like I kind of use it almost like as like a cologne. I just really like Atomic Holiday. The reason that it's 1/4 of its normal price is Will said they just made way too much. Like the people that made it just overproduced by quite a bit. So he's just like, I got all this Atomic Holiday. Take it off my hands.
Yeah, take my Atomic Holiday, please.
Please.
Stan, what's your favorite soap?
Oh yeah, what do you like, Stan?
Well, lavender.
You're a vanilla man.
Yeah, but they have just like regular lavender, which is good. They also have the Cootie Killer liquid hand soap, which is a really nice smelling hand soap. Comes with like a little push
Pump
thing.
thing?
It squirts out.
Yeah,
it comes with a pump. And also Muirwood is on sale.
Oh yeah, it is. So you can get where we're going at with this. There's a lot of soaps. There's a lot of things that are on sale. Barrister and Man, awesome selection of shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more, as we like to say. So if you want to go over and save 15% off of your first order, go to Barrister and Man, use code THEDIVEDOWN23 for 15% off that order. Let's Will know you came through the dive down, and we appreciate it. All right, we are back. Stanislav, you have a very interesting card on this list, and I'm like, this card's boring. Oh, but wait, it's now in Pioneer and Standard.
That's right. We've cast it before, but
I don't know if
only
I
in
have,
Modern.
honestly.
The Royal We have cast Sleight of Hand. Single blue sorcery, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, the other on the bottom of your library. Modern players, we got Preordain. Pioneer players, they get Sleight of Hand. Puts everything into perspective if you think of it that way.
Yeah, so what? This is like additional opt and consider type stuff?
Yeah, I think this is like the third good 1-mana cantrip in Pioneer. Because we have opt, we have consider. We're not playing Quicken.
Is it better than either of those, really? Or is it just like, hey, this is more? And I could, maybe replace charter course or whatever. I don't know all the cards in there. Considerate planning, fateful days.
Well,
You mean strategic planning?
Yeah,
just
sure.
making up card names?
I'm just making up cards, yes.
It's hard to compare this against those two in particular because they put birds in the yard. Consider does too, theoretically. I don't know. I'm reluctant to say is it better or worse than consider or opt because those are instant speed, but this looks at 2, so you get a little bit of upfront selection. I think it's just good for consistency. It doesn't have to be Phoenix either though. This could just be in the ice decks, or Demolich decks. There's other spells payoffs now.
The other thing that's really weird about this
could just be an Is It Otters?
Yeah. The other thing that's weird about this and maybe relevant in a world that sometimes has a lot of Shieldred is this doesn't actually draw a card. So just keep in mind, you put the card in your hand. You don't draw it. So you do avoid that trigger for what it's worth, if it matters. I don't know. I guess in my mind, I always thought that this card was worse than Opt because it's a sorcery effect. This was always the third one that would get played in Storm. You know what I mean? Once we had access to all those other things, or I guess Storm's been so long ago, I don't remember really. But this feels like it's better in a combo deck where you really, really want to see 2 cards for some reason, and less good in a Phoenix-y type deck where maybe you want to be at instant speed more. But maybe you really want to see 2 cards in Phoenix. So I don't know. Like usual, these things are really hard to parse. I think there's going to be some decks that want Sleight of Hand. There's going to be some decks that want Opt, and there's going to be some decks that want Consider. And there'll be some that want 2 of them, but I don't think we're ever going to see one that wants all 3, right? because that's a lot of air.
Yeah, or like just maybe like a few of Sleight of Hands or something like that.
Don't forget like though 10. That we also have. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot the card that never sniffed modern play but was really good in Legacy, the blue
Brainstorm, yeah.
Flipping the creature that turns into a 3/2 flyer. Delver. We have Delver in Pioneer. We have 8 copies of Young Pyromancer basically. We even have Dreadhorde Arcanist. So like we have a lot of ways to turn 1-mana air into bodies, threats, stuff, value.
But I think even in that case, trying to build one of those decks, I don't know if you can play 12 cantrips, you know what I mean? But maybe you want Sleight of Hand in that one because you're going to recast it with Arcanist, so you don't care about it being sorcery speed kind of thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. There you go.
So, notable, questionable. It's probably another tool in your tool belt, but I don't think it changes anything for anybody, really.
Dave, you should bring your Magic deck in a tool belt. You just like have 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah,
for your next tournament.
I do have that. It's a heavy play. I've been working with Randy on it. It's the heavy play tool belts
with magnets.
That's right, with magnets attached. It's just a bunch of magnets on a belt that you attach your deck boxes to. Randy, you can use that idea if you want to.
Good idea.
Go for it.
I'm gonna make that. I'm gonna custom make that. What else do we have here? Anything? What's left on this table of cards in front of us for which we are Rochester drafting?
Well, I think there's one weird card to talk about that I actually think has some chance to see.
One weird card.
This is kind of a weird card that I actually think has a chance to see modern play.
It is
up the Beanstalk for a generic and a green.
Make
up the Beanstalk.
Up your Beanstalk.
It's not an insult. It's an enchantment that says when Up the Beanstalk enters the battlefield, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So you get to draw a card when it comes into play, which I think is pretty much everything with this card. And then also when you get to do something like evoke Solitude, you get to draw a card. When you play a Fury, you get to draw a card. You know, obviously, I think there's stuff that could make this work in modern, especially those decks that were sort of Karuga style.
The Leyline qualifies for this, doesn't it?
Yeah, Leyline Binding qualifies for it as well. So there's all these cards in modern right now where like cheap cards used to be what everybody did, and like that's how you could kind of identify a modern playable card. Now it's cards with extensive cost reduction or alternate casting costs that I think are kind of like a big part of it now. So yeah, it's a 5-mana card, but I actually cast it for 1, and this card really pays you off for that the same way Karuga does. So maybe there's something in that space where you start with a Karuga style deck that you just have Up the Beanstalk instead of Karuga. You get to draw cards when it comes into play. It's a persistent draw effect, and obviously you don't get to play Karuga because Up the Beanstalk is only 2 mana.
Oh, I was going to say, like, are you posting like the Karuga likes, like laser eye gif, but you are not.
I mean, I think you're posting that gif, but maybe Karuga also has to like sit this one out.
Yeah, it's a cool card. I think it's in a very specific type of deck potentially, or maybe it's just like, hey, this is a value add, and like, you know, are you saying like maybe Omnath or like Bring to Light type stuff or what?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that's running a grip of a bunch of Evoke Elementals. I mean, 5 is a lot of mana, but if you're playing Leyline Binding and you're playing Solitude, you know, you probably have a couple more things that fit in there with 5. Then you can play this, and you can kind of go from there. And this even rewards you. It's not just permanence, it's any spell. So like you said, if you cast Bring to Light, you get to draw a card.
Yeah.
But again, the only reason I think this is possible is because this also draws a card itself when it ETBs.
Yeah. Do you think an original Eldraine, this would have flash?
Maybe.
It would be free if it was on the first turn.
Yeah, exactly.
2 words for you, David. Hooting mandrills.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And the blowfish.
Climbing that beanstalk, those hooting mandrills.
Yeah. Do you say blowfish? What fish?
Hootie.
Oh, hooting mantles and the blowfish. I mean, you draw a card off of Murktide Regent with this, you know?
Climb
if you ever wanted to do that.
Beanstalk.
All right.
Yeah.
That's Up the Beanstalk.
Sweet.
Get up this Beanstalk, everybody. Get on board the Beanstalk. The SS Beanstalk.
Can we briefly talk fairies? There's a lot of fairy stuff in this set. And I think one of the most interesting ones is Sleep Cursed Fairy. Mm-hmm. Single blue mana for a 3/3. Shane, that sounds great, but wait, there's more. It has flying and ward too. Shane, that sounds even better. Oh no, it ETB's tapped with 3 stun counters on it.
It's a lot of stun counters,
which means
buddy.
If it would become untapped, remove a stun counter from it instead. So What does that mean? So if there's nothing else, okay, and you can pay 1 in the blue to untap Sleep Cursed Fairy. Okay. So at ETBs, as 3 stun counters, that means turn 1, turn 2, remove a stun counter. Turn 3, remove a stun counter. Turn 4, remove a stun counter. Turn 5, untap. Correct?
Correct.
Stanislav.
Also worth noting, if you're paying 1 in a blue and it has a stun counter on it, it doesn't untap. It just removes a stun counter.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So that's actually an interesting thing, right? So you could sink some mana into this if you're playing this late, which is kind of like an interesting line here, right? Where it's like, hey, if you have extra mana around, you can sort of like get those stun counters off quickly. But, you end up with what, a 1 mana 3/3 or a 7 mana 3/3 flyer with Ward 2.
Yeah, I also think it's worth noting that I don't know if that's the full extent of the line you're talking about, because you left one thing out, which is that you can pay the activated ability at instant speed, of course. So if you're playing a deck with counter spells, you can leave the mana open, or a deck with flash creatures.
Yes.
You can leave the mana open and be like, hey, okay, at the end of turn 2, I'm going to have a Sleep Cursed Fairy in play. I'm going to pass my turn. I'm going to have an instant, and I'll decide in my opponent's end step if I want to take a stun counter off of it, or if I want to do something like flash in a creature or counter a spell or something like that.
I love all this. You are neatly segueing into kind of like why this card's on the list, right? Which is like, this is a 1 mana fairy spell synergy enabler that also is a pretty significant threat if you have the ability to work with it early, right? So it's a cheap enabler, it's a strong flyer for a cheap cost just to like get it on the board in the first place, and then you have all this kind of shenanigans you can play. So I think it's a perfect card for like, a fairy tempo-y Dimir fairies type thing, maybe, right? Where I think you can have a lot of fun playing this card, and it just can beat down if you need to. So like an example is like Spell Stutter, which is like it's basically the Spell Stutter sprite thing without the creature. It's just a 1 in blue instant, and it's kind of like a Rune Snag effect. But, they pay an additional 1 mana for each fairy you control. So, like, no one's playing Rune Snag in Modern, but maybe there's some potential in, like, Pioneer Fairies for, like, a Mana Leak style effect. There's, like, a lot of fairies when I was looking at the list, and we can't talk about them all, where it's just like, hey, here's this blue-black flash fairy with flying, and whenever another fairy ETBs, each opponent loses a life, and it's a 2/2. Or there's there's just a lot of stuff like that where you have a lot of play and like the disruption. We talked about that black removal spell, so
Fairy fencing.
That's super strong.
And there's a Thoughtseize. There's a card that becomes Thoughtseize if you have a fairy in play.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely like a huge piece to that deck. I don't know how good it is, but you will 100% see it day one on the arena ladder, or in like probably a Pioneer League, or like the tournament practice room or something.
Yeah, I kind of wish they would decide what they want blue-black to be, like tribally in Pioneer. It's like rogues. Like this would go great with a lot of rogues, but the rogues aren't fairies, right? Most rogues aren't fairies. There are some fairy rogues, but I like this card too, and I think it has a lot of potential to do interesting things, and we'll see if it's good or not.
Yeah. And then you go up the curve to like a stronger, if you're going more control, like you have like Talion the Kindly Lord, which is a card I've heard people talk about, 2 blue-black for a legendary fairy noble with flying. It's a 3/4. When it ETBs, you choose a number between 1 and 10, and whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the chosen number, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So I didn't even really notice this was a fairy when I was looking at this last week, and I'm not really sure this effect is any good. Like, it's when you're behind, it kind of sucks, maybe, and there's a lot of variance to keep you ahead. But, like, this is the kind of thing that you can potentially close your opponent down or just make it impossible for them to really cast their hand. And you drawing a card is bonkers. So there's just a lot of, like, interesting options here. So I think Fairies has some potential. I
mean, the 1 mana one is the best part of all this.
Yeah, for sure.
I think this Lord is not very good, but
me either.
Interesting card. All right, I've got a weird card to talk about. Collector's Vault. 2 colorless for an artifact that says 2 generic tap it, draw a card, then discard a card, create a treasure token. This is a weird card.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a great discard enabler, colorless discard enabler, if you want to be able to loot for some reason with something that can't be killed as a creature, and that, you know, theoretically can be used the turn it's played if you have enough mana. And then also for some reason it just makes treasure tokens for 2 mana, which I don't think we have a lot of things that make treasure tokens for
yeah,
cheap
like I don't know
artifacts.
if we have a lot of tools for repeatable treasure tokens like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea what kind of thing this goes in. This feels like a card that could be not broken, but an extremely good synergy piece of some kind of deck that is super annoying to play against.
I have something similar to that, Dave, unless you want to keep going down this road.
I don't have more to say about it. I was hoping you guys would take the ball, but
no, I got nothing.
You guys are just acknowledging. You guys are just like, yeah, this card does seem like it exists and does seem like it could do something.
Certainly is a printed piece of cardboard. And as is Candy Trail, which is a 1 mana artifact food clue. When it ETBs, you scry 2. Then you can 2 tap, sack, gain 3 life, and draw a card. Again, not bonkers, but it could be like a Saga target in John Sagavan is what I was hearing, like to replace like the Mishra's research desk thing. But you can't unearth this like you can the desk, but like you don't have to play the card within like a certain short window of time like the desk. Right. I think there's potential for this like in Urza decks potentially. It's just cheap. It does something. It fixes your draw with the Scry 2. It's a food and a clue type thing. So it's just like this is very flexible, cool card. I don't know if it does anything.
Yep. All right. Anything else on the list that we want to talk about before we try to like wrap up some thoughts here? Stan, is there anything on your list that you still... Oh, there are a couple of things, right?
Yeah, I think we should talk maybe... Yeah. There's like the Virtue cycle we never touched. I don't know if there's anything there.
Well, Virtue of Persistence is the one that I think is the most interesting on paper. 5 BB for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Note that is any graveyard. And then it has the adventure of Lochthwain Scorn. 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Seems good. Jerry?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know
I feel like,
where. Yeah.
Well, I think this is like a good card for coffers, where it's a removal spell early, and then when you have coffers online, you just have like a really strong win condition, potentially.
That just brings back Sheoldred over and over again, for example, isn't it?
Yeah, or
those were like the only creatures, right?
But it's any graveyard. So whatever you've been killing on your opponent's side, or making them discard with your Lilianas, for instance, you're getting back to be threats of your own.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. This seems like something that people would definitely try in that deck in some quantity, mostly because it's removal that, it's removal plus a win con. Yeah. I also kind of like the red one for what it's worth.
What's that one?
Virtue of Courage. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library and play those cards this turn. And then it has Stomp. Basically, it deals 2 damage to any target on the adventure side for 2 mana for a generic and a red. And so it synergizes with itself. It's not that expensive. It's 5 CMC. It's on the cheaper end of these virtues. And it helps a deck that maybe tends to run out of steam, burn, potentially not run out of steam anymore if you resolve it. And I can't believe I'm saying that maybe a burn deck might put a 5 mana enchantment in there, but at least it's a bad shock on the front side. And I don't think modern burn, but maybe this is something that you try out in a kind of pioneer, kind of low powered burn kind of vibe. See what happens to you.
So you would run that over like a Bedlam Reveler type thing?
Yeah, yeah. And you probably would only run a couple of these because you don't really want the shock. You don't really want the other side. But it seems powerful.
I'm kind of out of cards. Stanislav, anything else you want to talk about before we get to kind of our tops of the set?
Yes, one last one. Sentinel of Lost Lore.
This is all you, man.
I think this Sentinel of Lost Lore, 1 green for an elf knight. It's a 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1 or more. It rhymes. Return target card you own in exile that has an adventure to your hand. So if you've cast an adventure card and it's on an adventure, you can just redraw it Or put target card you don't own in exile that has an adventure on the bottom of its owner's library. Or exile target player's graveyard. Why not? I love that they just tacked on graveyard hate. Just like, sure, you can just have like the extra mode for good adventure.
They've determined that the opportunity cost for including exile target player's graveyard is very low on lots of cards at this point in Magic's design.
Yeah. So when adventures were in standard last, there was a Temur Adventures deck that I think was the best deck in the format at the time, or for a time at least.
Yeah.
And it never really went beyond standard, though Pioneer did exist then. And I wonder if it's a card like this that can maybe actually bridge the adventure deck that used to exist in standard with something that's actually Pioneer playable, because it can let you just replay your best adventures and exile opponents' graveyards in the process.
Yeah, I mean, this is like extremely safe. It's like sort of like, hey, this is doing enough where it's likely going to see some kind of play, but like this would be almost like a new build around, right? Where it's like you would have to be in an environment where you wanted to recast the spell side of an adventure, or it's an adventure meta where you know that you probably have some play to stop your opponent's adventure card on the spell side of it resolve, or excuse me, on like the creature. I think they're all creatures mostly. So yeah, on the permanent side. And just exiling graveyards, gravy 2. And a 3/4 for 3 is not the end of the world. It's a perfectly serviceable card. So it's like, hey, I see it, right? Where it's like, this can see play, but I think it requires the right building around or environment in which to have some power.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, Stan, as a way to do exactly what you were saying. I do think there's a funny fringe case where, like, if somebody exiles your adventure card themselves, like when it's in play, you just get to bring the whole thing back. So like the way it's written is like, oh, you cast a spell and you want to recast the spell, cool, this Sentinel can help you do that. But it's also, I think, if someone leyline binds your permanent, you can just go get it back.
Yeah, or the white Path to Exile aura.
Leyline binding?
No, well, enchant a mountain you control.
Oh, yeah, Chain to the Rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I think this card is a total good like role player in an adventure heavy deck for sure. All right,
guys, this set is not that exciting. I mean, I know we just talked about like 20 cards.
We keep saying this, don't we? Were we more excited with previous standard sets?
I don't even know anymore.
I mean, I feel like we talked more about this set than we have about a lot. And I think a lot of these cards are kind of very medium. It's very kind of much, this could create a new Pioneer build around, right? Like a few cards we think have some modern play. I think it's fine to have a standard set have a good Pioneer impact more than modern. We just had some big modern impact that we're still wrestling with. I don't necessarily need to have like 5 cards from a standard set go into modern every time. So, yeah, I mean, I think overall, maybe it's after like the fire design of the last set, where it's just kind of like, man, these adventures seem pretty safe. There's a couple that seem potentially okay. They do 1 damage for, 1 mana or something like that, or they bounce a spell at sorcery speed for 2 mana. And it's like, are we supposed to be excited about this stuff? And I think we found a way, but I don't know. Maybe it's the theme. Maybe it's the fact that there wasn't like a really cool 3D video that I saw, at least, where it's like, remember those when they were doing like the
2 gingerbread people?
The cool 3D videos? What happened to the 3D videos? The trailers?
I think they still do them
strikes.
Sometimes. The strikes.
It might be.
The strikes happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this will do something different than I expect, honestly. And I think that there's some cards that might be pretty interesting and pretty cool. And I think there's some cards that'll be interesting role players. I'm hoping there's like new decks that get made. Like some kind of adventures deck in Pioneer or something like that would be really cool, or fairies would be cool and annoy me. But
do you guys want to do superlatives?
Let's do it.
Let's do a few superlatives. We got a long list here. I don't know if I don't know if I have answers for all of these, but we can do it.
Yeah, Dave. How about you? You pick the one. You pick the superlatives that you like. So superlatives, for those who don't recall, and you may remember them from high school yearbooks, where it's just like best smile, class clown.
Most likely to be broken.
Yeah.
I won
most
best
likely to be
facial
a
hair
broken
in high
person.
school.
So we came up with a handful of
That's what
superlatives
best
for this
facial hair,
set.
the subtext was, actually, Stan, was most likely to be a broken person.
Most likely to work at
Why is
Guitar
he
Center.
shaving in junior high school?
I mean, I did. What can you say? All right. So let's start. Best card. Best card overall. Like, what do you guys think is your pick
man.
for the most impactful card in the set?
I have a boring answer and a fun answer.
Here's what I'm saying, though. Impactful card in the set. I'm not saying the card that's going to be played the most, because I do think we can all agree that the card that's likely going to be played the most is Not Dead After All, right?
In modern, for sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Between Modern and Pioneer, I think it might be the
Yeah.
card that's played the most.
Okay, here I think the most impactful card might be Agatha's Soul Cauldron, because I think there's so many weird options, so many weird interactions that people are coming up with. I think, at least in terms of gameplay impact, like to the culture and fabric of the game, Agatha's Soul Cauldron will make an impact for a couple weeks. If it sticks around, that will be fun and interesting. But I think Agatha's Soul Cauldron is probably the most interesting brewable card in the set.
I agree with that, for what it's worth. I don't even have a different answer for that.
Wow.
What do you like, Stanislav?
Well, there's the card I want. Like, I want it to be an interesting, cool creature card. Like, I want it to be something like Talion, which we didn't talk about. I don't think you guys talked about last week either. Maybe I'm not remembering. But Talion the Kindly Lord, the 4-mana Faerie Noble flying. When it enters, you choose a number between 1 and 10.
You remember when I talked about that?
We just talked about that a minute ago.
And I was talking about fairies. Maybe you were distracted because I was talking about fairies, so it wasn't that interesting.
Yeah.
Actually,
I agree.
well, my internet went out, and I just didn't hear anything, and you guys were frozen, and I was just kind of like
Oh, that's funny.
twiddling my thumbs. Yeah. But no, I want it to be Talion, because I just think, like, it's an interesting design space, and I want cards that are doing something that are novel on, like, a kind of a scary must-kill creature. Like, that's what I want out of my most impactful cards, rather than, like, interaction or combo pieces.
What's your favorite adventure, Stan?
I think it's just the Viper.
Still.
Scalding Viper.
With the sorcery speed.
Yeah, a bad bounce and a bad snake.
You like that more than the
makes for
otter? Or the dragon?
I don't
which
think the dragon's very good.
Yeah, it might not be.
Yeah, I think the dragon's a little too expensive. I don't like the green otter because it seems like doesn't have like an obvious home. And
Please, he's a blue otter with a
experimenting.
green adventure.
Yeah. And then the flying otter is close. It's close. I just think this is probably a better card because the creature costs 2 and like does stuff. Like this has the Bone Crusher like static ability almost of like, even if they kill the snake, it's dealing damage to them. So I just feel like this could be sneaky good, like a snake often is.
Dave, do you like any of these adventures? The ones like the 20 we talked about?
I mean, I like the otters that we talked about. I think they're pretty good. I thinking about it now. I like the mono black virtue that Stan just pointed out to me, especially when you think about putting it in to coffers. I actually think there's a decent chance that becomes a card that we see a bit then. I think those are the best one. I mean, I like the green black knight that I brought up, the Mosswood Dreadknight or whatever. I think there's a chance that does some stuff as well. So I guess maybe the thing that I think is actually the best adventure though is probably the mono black virtue, which is weird to say. I didn't think I was going to come into today saying that, but after we just talked about it, I feel like it's kind of a slam dunk to do something cool.
That's interesting.
Best token maker in a set full of food and other stuff.
Is there anything more than Tough Cookie? Like, Tough Cookie is really good.
Tough Cookie is super good. I'm going to go with Collector's Vault, which I just talked about, because it makes treasures.
Yeah.
And that seems busted, but
I think Tough Cookie is good enough to be like to make a whole new deck, or make an old deck revamped around it or something like that. Like, just it's good. It does a lot with the token.
Is this the one that you guys woke me up in the middle of the night when you mentioned scissors?
Yes.
And I had to like burst out of bed and explain to my wife.
Just came to
what
life.
it's like being 2 for 1. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's good.
I have a curveball for this answer. This is a card that we did not talk about, and it's kind of like a weird way to describe a token maker, but it's Spellbook Vendor.
Yeah.
One and a white human peasant vigilance 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay a single generic mana, and when you do, create a sorcerer role token attached to target creature you control. And the sorcerer, I think that's 1/1 and ward 1.
Yes. No. That's royal. Its sorcerer role is
Scry 1.
Yeah.
It's Scry when it attacks.
Yep, Scry 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this card is interesting because it can make it. Doesn't it make one like every turn? So if you have a bunch of creatures, it just keeps putting those on top of each other. Also,
yeah, and it could target itself too.
Why does this card have vigilance? That's the funniest thing to me. Like thematically, it's like I sell books. I'm a vigilant bookseller. Like that's very strange to me, but okay.
Librarian's tougher than you think.
You've shown many times over the years the librarians are tougher than you think.
Conan the librarian. That's me.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, I think there's. Yeah, I think this is cool. I wish it made my creatures. I don't know. Scrying is just like such a weird ability to like have on that aura, but +1/+1 doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What's the last superlative we want to hand out here?
Do you think anything's going to get banned? Do you think anything's good enough? I think there's some cards that Besiege the Mirror could be banned in Legacy.
That seems like quite outside of our realm of expertise.
I'm going to go back to Agatha's Soul Cauldron for a second, right? I think there's enough weird crap with this card. I mean, it is an artifact that has to be on the board to like do what it's going to do. But like, I just have seen so many weird options people have where it's like, yeah, you exile this and like all of a sudden this combo exists, or, you know, all of your creatures are walking ballistas or something like that. And it's like, well, maybe that's good. I don't know. Like there's just a lot of like interesting potential here. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think like I'm watching that space. Like I'm not going to brew with this card. It's not my thing. I don't want to jump through the hoops like that, but other people definitely do.
Yeah.
Not that after all could make something else get banned. Like if let's say it just makes Scam even a few percentage points better, like maybe WotC will have to act. I don't know.
So I think in that situation, they'd probably just ban
they're not going to ban. They would not
effects.
ban this card. They're not going to ban Not Dead After All.
They're not banning, but yeah, nor Grief. Like I think they're banning like Undying Evil or something.
Yeah, I don't think anything beyond those could possibly be banned.
All right. Overall, interesting set. Potential impact. Potential build-arounds. I'm mildly excited. I think people who play... I guarantee that this will have a bigger arena impact than it will in paper.
Yes, I like what you're saying there. I think because our reaction to the set is a little muted, I think this is the type of set that like is positioned to surprise us.
That's true. I mean, we've done this so many times now, and we're so often a little bit wrong about the impact of these sets. And we're like, oh my God, we missed the like 1 mana spell that does X, that blah, blah, blah. But
yes,
I don't really see something like that here, but I do think Agatha's Soul Cauldron is like a lot of stuff.
I think we boiled the ocean pretty well in this set. Like, I think we definitely have. We've been through a lot of sets together, like in 4.5, 4.75 years. I think we have had sets I've definitely have had less to say about. Even though I think that I'm not super excited about this, I think there's a lot of cards we talked about that all have something going on. So let's see what happens.
Let's do it.
And with that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to our podcast or reach out in general, you can tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Also, shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring The Dive Down. Use promo code THEDiveDown2023 to get 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And head over to heavyplay.com to get some incredible deck and dice boxes and playmats featuring the Equip Mag system. Use promo code THEDiveDown2023 there as well for 10% off your first order. Also, get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more at Barrister & Mann using the DiveDown23 for 15% off your first order. And then save some money on paper cards over at Nerd Rage Gaming with code DIVE8 for 8% off your order with them. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and explore the wilds of Eldraine! Shane, you want to see something cool?
Is it a Pokemon card?
How dare you put those in your heavy play box? Heavy play is only for Magic.
It's slight. I have to admit, Stan, your camera is slightly blurry, so I'm looking at what I imagine to be Pokemon cards.
Yeah, it's my Palkia V deck.
I have to say, there's so much Pokemon suddenly across the people I know in Discord and on this podcast and Twitter that I feel like some kind of guerrilla marketing push is going on right now. Did something happen that's made Pokemon pop, as they say?
Here's what happened. Everyone learned to play Lorcana and realized that it's not as fun as the other games.
Okay, and they're all going back to Pokemon now?
And I think we also realized that Pokemon is just like unbelievably cheap to play. Unbelievably cheap to play.
That's surprising to me because I know the packs are extremely popular and they have normal MSRPs. So what makes the cards inside cheap? Just like there's just super chase cards, everything else is cheap?
It's a high supply, normal demand issue. So like people love cracking Pokemon boosters, and what you have is a consumer base that's like more collectors than players. So people just like are cracking packs, chasing like hollows or foils, and then everything else ends up being really cheap. And also just because they're cracking so many packs, like even the chase cards tend to be pretty reasonably priced.
So you are saying that silly children are asking their parents for like packs at the store and then cracking them, and so there's just endless supply of people who have bad EV. If even the chase cards are cheap.
Yeah, but it's not just the children, Shane. It's the grown-ups too. They're just addicted to cracking packs.
Gotta catch them all, baby.